Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 24th of June 2024. Let's get straight to where we normally start. Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. You can find them in the description to the video below, and some fairly high numbers across a number of categories today. First of all, in the personnel category, 1,300 is a slight uptick from yesterday. And that was already a little bit higher than previously. So getting up to the higher end of the range that we've seen. Yes, we have seen 1,740 as a record, but that is a little bit of an outlier. 1,300. I mean, it used to be that 1,000 was the amazing threshold to hope that Ukraine could get over in order that they can degrade the Russian troop capacity as much as possible. Well, now 1,300 is, well, we've seen it this last couple of weeks at 1,100, 200 or so. So now 1,300, that is a good number for the Ukrainians. Of course, please remember, these are all human beings, not just numbers. And some of these Russians have been sent to their deaths by a megalomaniacal dictator who is not interested in preserving the life of his citizens. Nonetheless, 1,300 does denote a good day for the Ukrainians. 12 tanks is above average. That is good for them. 15 armored personnel vehicles is pretty much on point average, a normal day if you like. IFVs or armored personnel vehicles, IFVs, APCs, MRAPs, all those kinds of vehicles. That is, I think, usually a good representation of how much attacking is going on a daily basis. That's what the Russians would be using to attack. However, I wonder whether they are cycling through a lot of those bits of kit because they're now using sort of motorbikes and quads and all sorts of vehicles. And I wonder whether, seeing a lower day there is, but yet a high day of losses is representative of the challenge Russia faces in throwing in mechanized equipment day after day after day after day. Artillery systems, 51 of those losses, an incredibly high number. They're over 3 times the daily average. And then we come on to vehicles and fuel tanks, 56 of those, and 20 pieces of special equipment. So that's a very high number in that last category, special equipment. And vehicles and fuel tanks, 56. It's not going to be easy to take those losses consistently. So let's have a look at Andrew Perpetua's list, and we have a massive list of losses. It's been a bit closer to parity over the last 3 or 4 days, although we've looked into the details to find that the combat losses have been in favour of Ukraine a little bit more. Well, here's a much more overtly favourable day for the Ukrainians. So Andrew Perpetua splits these numbers up really usefully. Thanks, mate. So 94 Russian losses in total against 30 Ukrainian losses. And it doesn't look to me like that is 30 losses there. Maybe it is. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure that is. So anyway, what do I know? Either way, that's over 3-1 Russian to Ukrainian losses. So that's really good for the Ukrainians. And then you can see there's a couple of decoys at the bottom there, a couple of trees or whatever that have been hit that you can take off. Then of those that have been destroyed, 33 of the Russian losses are combat assets, of which 1 is captured, 7 abandoned, 17 destroyed. So we add those together and you get 25 against 8 damaged. So actually that's a 3-1 ratio of fundamentally lost against damage, which is a good ratio for the Ukrainians. And we come down to the Ukrainian losses. They have only 7 combat losses. So actually that's a 4-1 combat asset loss, more than 4-1. That's almost 5-1 of Russian to Ukrainian losses. And that's what Ukraine is going to want to see. 4 destroyed and 3 damaged. So pretty much parity for the Ukrainians, but far fewer in total. 4 civilian transport vehicles were destroyed, plus 1 truck. I couldn't identify 4 vehicles. One was likely from a form of counter battery radar. Another looks like an MTLB. So there you go. We'll look at the Ukrainian losses first to see what they have lost there. And maybe that is 30, yeah, almost. Right. Okay, we've got some Starlinks, a counter-battery radar hit by Lancet. That's one that he couldn't. Oh no, he's got unknown down there. So you see, look at the Lancets here. So Lancets have taken out 4 bits of kit there. We come down here, 5, 6, and then the 2 that hit trees were Lancets as well, going for something else, but to just hit the tree canopy by the target. Lancets are still a big problem. Something needs to be done about those as far as the Ukrainians are concerned, I'm sure. Quite a few night vision drones being used there. We look at the Ukrainian equipment loss, nothing too serious there. We've got some Max Pro MRAPs, mine-resistant ambush protection vehicles, some old howitzers, or an old howitzer and Soviet-era self-propelled gun, pickup trucks, nothing too valuable there. So that's good for the Ukrainians. Then we come to the Russians. No crazy valuable vehicle or piece of equipment like a radar or an air defense system. But if we look again, we've already seen that many more of the Russian vehicles have been destroyed as opposed to damaged. You look at the brown there compared to the grey, the brown and black compared to the grey, that's a bad day for the Russians for sure. Anyway, as we come back here, so quite a few bits of artillery lost. We have a BM-21 Grad, so it's a multiple launch rocket system destroyed. Comes down to the tanks. We've got a T-90M that's been captured. I'll show you the video of that. That's fairly good for the Ukrainians because that's the top tank the Russians use. I wonder whether they'll take that back, look at it, or I mean, it's not. I think they have captured other T-90s before, but whether we'll see them use that against the Russians. Track garden shed. Those are those. In this case, a tank with extra stuff built on top to give protection to troops that might be sitting on top of the tank. They're generally tanks that seem to be inoperational. So a number of tanks abandoned there, and then infantry fighting vehicles mainly were entirely destroyed or abandoned for the IFVs, so that's significant. Most of them BMP-1s, a few BMP-3s, a couple of BTR-82s. And come down to the APCs, a track garden shed, again, made from an MTLB and a couple of other MTLBs. And then we have a large number of ATVs there, Desert Cross 1000-3, and I wonder in the General Staff stats whether that will be included in vehicles and fuel tanks. That's where you got a high 56 number there, and then you got infantry or armored personnel vehicles down to 15, which is, it's an average day. That's okay. But like I was saying earlier, do they have fewer APCs left to use in infantry fighting vehicles? And you look at the number of ATVs here, so that is 9 ATVs. So those are the golf buggies and 1 quad. They are using more and more of these to do their attacking, it seems, and that fits in with what my thesis was. We have a large number of Buchanka Scooby-Doo vans or loafs, and then a pickup loaf, different types of loafs being used. Those Buchanka vans are, well, they would have been 10 a penny before the war. They're cycling through an awful lot of them at the moment and losing quite a few of them. Unknown cause, that's an interesting video. I wonder, well, it could be a video like we're just about to look at actually. Right, so first of all, on personnel side of things, here's a bit of footage. I can't show it to you, but you basically got a tank there, and either side of the tank, the road is littered with dead bodies. So 20 plus Russian dead just in that one area. And again, why I reference things like this is to say, is this a realistic number? Well, here's just one image essentially, and you've got 20 dead Russian soldiers. This is that captured a T-90M being passed on a Ukrainian road. So that's been captured. They'll be looking at that. Then this could be what the sort of footage that Andrew looks at to get unknown cause for destruction here, and all these pickups, loafs and whatnot. You have, I'm not going to show you the whole of this because I think it's a 4-minute video this, but Tendar says I'll have it playing while it'll be small while I read what Tendar says. This video really captures a bit of what Russians have to lose just to move a few kilometers in Europe's second largest country. 4 minutes of countless destroyed Russian vehicles, BMPs, Bukankas, trucks, etc. It is the road of death near Avdiivka. The most telling part is the only running vehicles in this clip are not tanks, APCs or infantry fighting vehicles, but completely wrecked civilian cars, motorbikes, and this quad, this so-called second strongest army in the world, reduced or better exposed to ISIS standard. And I think that is a really good point there, that when this quad, so first of all, the vehicle here is a quad, right? And as it's driving along this road by Avdiivka, you're just seeing countless vehicles completely destroyed. Now, you have no idea how these vehicles got destroyed, but this is almost certainly that long list of unknown cause vehicles that Andrew Perpetua has on his loss list. Just vehicle after vehicle after vehicle. And he is on a quad, and the only vehicles that are working that he passes are the odd sort of motorbike, and there's just a car, Bukanka, I think, other vehicles, infantry fighting vehicles there, just probably MTLB there. Incredible amount of kit, just astonishing numbers of vehicles destroyed here. And I guess, this guy's Russian, but I guess he's just showing you what the destruction is, just because it's quite an incredible scene. Anyway, that this video goes on and on and on and on. Just incredible. So when we then go back to look at these kind of statistics and go, well, that's crazy, they can't lose that many, and you've just got a 4-minute video showing you just a phenomenal amount of equipment just in one area. And of course, that'll all be geolocated by Andrew and his team, and added to his list. So, okay, Richard Varekas from War Spotting does kind of what Oryx does. Jakub Janovsky is the guy running Oryx these days, although I think he also helps with War Spotting. Richard Varekas makes some theory about visually confirmed artillery pieces, but Jakub Janovsky says, in my opinion, given the limited visual evidence of artillery losses, we expect most artillery losses not to be visually documented, and for short-range artillery losses to be more likely to be documented. People should not be making too many conclusions from what data is available. So I'm not going to read you that. It's just because I think it's a bit speculative, but I think this is interesting because it goes back to the difference between the number of artillery pieces listed on a daily basis by the General Staff and then visually confirmed artillery losses are usually nowhere near the losses reported on a daily basis. So that is 2, 4, 6, 8, 9. So there's 9 pieces of artillery there and 51 there. It's a huge difference. But I've often said that Andrew himself has admitted that it skews away from visually confirmed losses for artillery, because usually when you're buying satellite imagery, so Andrew Perpetua, a lot of his stuff is, yes, they're looking at videos, so it's great if you get someone driving way behind the lines or somewhat behind the lines there and seeing all this destroyed footage, destroyed equipment, because he's like tick 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 tick, that's all great. But a lot of what he does is poring over satellite images where you see this equipment and you are ticking that off and adding it to your list, but that is almost always on a contact line rather than behind a contact line, like 20 kilometers back, where you have a howitzer throwing lead at the Ukrainians. You don't have the satellite image looking 20 kilometers back, because it's not that useful for finding out what activity is going on the contact line, and so therefore you don't get to see as much artillery destroyed or the remnants of artillery pieces. And you're therefore only relying on drone footage that is catching that, and that you don't always get that with counter battery fire. You don't often get it anyway, because it's probably not as exciting imagery just seeing a drone go into a D20 howitzer. People much prefer to see it going into a moving infantry fighting vehicle or tank, and so it's less likely to be uploaded that's stuff hitting these howitzers behind the line. And so as a result, Jakub Janovsky says, we expect artillery losses not to be visually documented, and for shorter range artillery losses. So it's interesting when you do see artillery losses they will be the shorter range ones that have to be pulled closer to the front. In other words, your D20s and D30s, and that's exactly what we see here. Not all the time, but I've talked for a while that D20s and D30s we're seeing a lot more of them, partly because they run out the good stuff, so they're using the older stuff. But then with the older stuff, you've got to move it closer to the front because the range is not as good. The barrels are old and crappy, and so that affects the range. You have to bring them even closer, and there's every possibility that these have like 10 to 15 kilometer ranges on them, so they do get brought closer to the front, and you do get to see more of those visually confirmed. Anyway, moving on to just another little nugget here. I like these kind of random nuggets that come out of nowhere. So when I'm looking at the side of a HIMARS that come back from Ukraine, so this is a guy that's talking about seeing a HIMARS vehicle that's being, I presume, being repaired in the US. So we've seen a couple of them get sent back to the US, although I think going forward they might be able to be repaired in Europe now. But he says, when I'm looking at the side of a HIMARS, the symbols they have on it, and every single symbol are dead Russian equipment. And for each symbol, it's about 10 systems. So one symbol represents 10 of whatever it is that they've destroyed. I once saw a launcher with about 60 systems. In other words, that's General Darrell Williams here, the USFA Association. In other words, that HIMARS has taken out 600 bits of kit. Absolutely insane. Take it with a pinch of salt, but yeah, there you go. Here we have HIMARS being used. Now, the reason I'm including this, don't worry, there's nothing inappropriate. You can see from the footage there that this is a DPICM, so this is a cluster munition variant of the HIMARS. So likely the first footage of Ukrainian forces using a US-supplied M30 Gimlet's rocket, guided multiple launch rocket system rocket, carrying 404 M101 DPICM submunitions. So in other words, that explodes to scatter 404 submunitions that themselves have smaller explosions to target a Russian grouping in Zaporizhia. So this is more ideal for taking out groups of personnel or scattered equipment. The M30, previously not supplied in favour of the M30A1, brings a new cluster munition capability to Ukraine. So just to go through some of the different types of Gimlet's rockets, we have the M30, which carries 40 DPICM M101 submunitions. It's got a range of 15 to 92 kilometers. So actually slightly more than the 84 kilometers from the previous ones but actually it says 92 for all of these. So maybe 84 kilometers is the realistic range, or that's behind enemy lines. Anyway, so this one, yeah, the remaining US M30 rockets have been converted to M31 unitary warhead variant, but not all of them, obviously. So they have now, Ukraine are receiving some of those submunition ones. Otherwise, they get the unitary one, such as these. Sometimes they have a loaded tungsten, sort of ball bearings, if you like, but probably not ball bearings. Tungsten fragments that spray out, so it's just not quite a cluster munition. These aren't explosives, but it's it sprays those out, and that's usually what we see when we see the HIMARS rockets used. But yeah, so that's a new cluster variant being, well, it's actually an old cluster variant being used for the first time, possibly. Right, Kherson, Andrew Perpetua, just a general statement here. In Kherson, grenades, mortars, enemy drones, aircraft bombs, rockets, all this being launched by enemy troops at our rescuers. Every day there's a risk of coming under enemy fire, but our brave and courageous men and women hold their fronts and continue to save lives and homes. Thank you, our heroes. Although I think he's pasted that from the source here. But the idea is that Kherson just is still getting routinely smacked about by Russians, and of course, when they do that, I've been to Kherson. There are no military targets in Kherson. It's becoming a bit deserted these days. It's not useful for the army to be there. It would just cause the civilians to be targeted even more and more. So every time Kherson is being hit, it is terrorism. It's just war criminal terrorism. And then when the rescuers go and try and help out, then often double taps and they get hit, and it's just horrific. As my classic understatement goes, it's just not cool. And by it's just not cool, I mean it's freaking disgusting. Okay, moving on to distance munitions and strikes. A few things to report on. The main one in Ukraine is that Odessa has been hit, and it has been hit pretty big time just this morning. Huge fire coming from a civilian bit of infrastructure, as in I think it's commercial. I was trying to getting some footage driving past where it's at. I don't know if it's some kind of, not Novoposhta, but some kind of logistics hub. Many of us are still trying to get used to the idea that Russians will eventually destroy Odessa. Odessa is such a beautiful historic city, and third biggest in Ukraine, and it is getting chipped away at, gradually destroyed by the Russians. It's terrible. Russians can only destroy. That's all they know. Destroy, get money. Huge plume of smoke there coming out of Odessa. Huge cloud of black smoke. Preliminarily, the city was hit by 2 cruise missiles. Information is being verified. And this video shows the scale of the fire in Odessa after the attack. The column of smoke continues to grow. It's just, massive. So that's bad news for Odessa. Now, last night in Crimea, a really significant attack. I think it's 8 ATACMS missiles were fired at an area, Yevpatoria area of Crimea was reported, village of Vitino to the west of Yevpatoria. Now, this is significant because, and you can see, significant fire taking place at Vitino. Video of that here, which we'll look at in a second. Well, actually, no, let's go for it now. You can see, that is a significant fire. Oops, no, wrong button there. That's in this Vitino area, and its firms data has also confirmed that. So this is your firms data that shows 2 big fires around there. Now, trying to work out what the 2 things that were hit were. Well, we'll come to that. First of all, what is this area known for? Well, actually, it's involved with the space program, and it is, as Jay in Kiev here says, and I can't verify this, but one of the 4 Russian satellite stations required for the Russian space program to take place, it goes up in smoke. That's in Crimea. Okay, Anton Gerashenko says, reportedly, this is a video of yesterday, so that there's that fire going on in the background, of yesterday's strike on Vitino's Space Communications Center in occupied Crimea. It functions as one of the key infrastructure elements for communication control of satellites used for various purposes, including reconnaissance and monitoring. So this is, yes, it's a space kind of communication center, but actually it's stuff to do with like GLONASS, and their version of GPS is incredibly important. I would have thought important target this. Vitino supports the operation of satellite surveillance and information gathering systems such as the Liana system, which includes the Lotos and Pion NKS satellites. Lotos is engaged in passive radar reconnaissance, and Pion NKS uses active radar for maritime reconnaissance. Moreover, the center in Vitino can be used to control electronic warfare systems such as the Dorada 2 and Bylina MM, which are designed to suppress communication signals from enemy satellites. It is an important link in Russia's space intelligence and electronic warfare system. So that incredibly significant, potentially significant target there. John Ridge says, while we don't yet know, and he said this much earlier, the targets of tonight's raid on Crimea, so this was early last night, I strongly suspect the large salvo size 8 ATACMS and the collateral effects of this morning's raid against Russian S-300P and S-400 fire units are becoming increasingly proficient at engaging ATACMS. So we're going to go on to look at what he's referencing there, which is that he's saying there's a larger salvo being used because could be that the Russians are starting to be able to shoot down these ATACMS missiles. And that is a challenge for the Ukrainians. Nonetheless, that seems to have done some pretty significant damage, one assumes. So Intermerium24 here says, as a thread, Ukrainian forces successfully attacked the Russian Space Tracking and Communication Center NIP-16 in Vitino in Crimea this evening. Potential consequences for Russia. Okay. 1. Disruptions in satellite communications and tracking of space objects. The strike could significantly impact Russia's ability to monitor and control its satellites. 2. Difficulties in military operations. Disruption of space infrastructure may weaken Russia's intelligence and operational capabilities, especially in military communications and navigation. 3. Weakened space monitoring. Reduced ability to track space objects could affect national security by limiting defense capabilities against potential threats from space. 4. Delays in space programs. The attack could cause delays in space research and missions, affecting Russia's long-term goals in space exploration. 5. Cost of repairs and reconstruction. Repairing or rebuilding the damaged infrastructure will require substantial financial and technological resources. 6. Disruption of international cooperation. The attack might impact Russia's relations with other countries, especially those cooperating in space endeavours. This attack further exacerbates the decline of Russia's space program, which already struggles due to reliance on outdated Soviet-era equipment. I can only imagine a panic among engineers now, having to replan space missions, reprogram hundreds of projects, costly, and more. By the way, in order to definitively end the Russian space program, there's only 3 more stations, just saying. So that's Jay and Kiev saying, it's 1 out of 4 there. And much more, I'm sure, analysis to be done on that strike. So let's translate this. He's saying, I told you, Russia has 40 vehicle launches planned for this year. If the NIP-16 station affects the Russian space program, which includes military systems, then damage to the facility can bring severe consequences. Okay, but it's potentially not just that radar system that was targeted there. And as we can see, there are 2 major sites of fires. NOL report says a 40th separate command and measuring complex was attacked, targeting 29 vehicles. 16 vehicles were near the officer core, suggesting the main target were the experienced officers working and living there. Additionally, the complex houses at least 1 Krasukha electronic warfare system used to protect command posts and other key facilities. Wow, so could be either that rather than the other place, rather than the other kind of facilities were destroyed, or both, or one or the other. Just, information is coming out. NASA firm's thermal imagery shows a fire is still burning at the 40th separate command and measuring complex, and this was this was in the middle of the night last night. GS Titov main test space center for the aerospace forces in the Russian Federation, known colloquially as the Center for Deep Space Communications in Vatino. The fire is at the location is most likely the result of today's ATACMS strikes. So there you go. A little bit more on that. Now, I guess more information will be forthcoming as satellite imagery comes out to see what was damaged there, because certainly something has been burning. So it could potentially be a massive coup there for the Ukrainians. Now, Russia themselves have been continuing dropping huge numbers of glide bombs, and they've been hammering Kharkiv Oblast particularly. And when we saw Kharkiv city get hit by those S-300s day after day, that was when the Americans said, right, enough is enough. You can now strike within Belgorod Oblast, and you can use Gimlers to do so. Not ATACMS, but you can use Gimlers. You can hit airplanes if they are imminent threats, but of course that's really rather difficult. What you want to be able to do is hit these air bases. So stuff like this happening on a daily basis, if you now see these guided glide bombs slam into Kharkiv on a daily basis, that could give the US enough ammunition, if you like, pun intended, to change their restrictions to allow Ukraine to hit Russian air bases. It's a bit like I said, there's this Putin paradox whereby the better Ukraine do, the more likely Putin is to do something disastrous, like tactical nukes or something like that. Well, actually, the better Russia do at terrorizing Kharkiv, the more likely it is that the US are going to say, yep, okay, you can use ATACMS to hit air bases. So there's a bit of a paradox there for Russia. They need to play that fine line, looking from a Russian point of view of damaging Ukraine but not too much. And I still don't understand why there's nothing that's going to annoy the international community more than hitting innocent civilian targets, right? So throwing stuff into Kharkiv is just so counterproductive, I think, for Russia. And yet it seems to be what they know and what they like. Jay in Kiev says, seizing the opportunity, Russians are now decimating the Kharkiv region with glide bombs, while the US still forbids Ukraine from striking Russian airfields with Western weapons. Ukraine's hands remain tied. I don't disagree. Russian soldiers hit a private school during shelling of Kharkiv. 1 person killed and 10 injured due to the shelling. Among the wounded were 2 teenagers, 15 and 16-year-olds. Now, it's absolutely terrible. Matt Bishop contacted me and said that his kid's school was hit. I don't know if it's this school, whether his kid went to this school. But you certainly have an awful lot of civilian educational infrastructure being hit there. We have, look, this is the moment that... Gee whiz, I'm so sorry. I didn't realise that would be that loud, and it was. I probably ruined your hearing. Anyway, here is the moment that a school was hit. Caught on the CCTV in one of the classrooms, just to let you know that this definitely wasn't a military target. This really was a school, and that seems to be where Russia is going with their strikes. A moment a Russian guided aerial bomb hit a school in Kharkiv. Videos from the surveillance camera. Thank goodness it's a weekend. And the Russian Ministry of Defense reported the alleged... so now we're moving on. Okay, so that was what's happening in Kharkiv. And that was on top of that guided glide bomb that hit in the middle of the city. That killed a few people and took out a residential block. There's pretty terrible stuff happening there. Then yesterday there was a lot of news, and the socials were full of this event, right? There were some ATACMS strikes on what appears to be Belbek Air Base, which is just up the road. And you had this video was one of many that sort of came out. So that's the beach at Sevastopol. As you can see, people are holidaying, and we'll come on to that. It's pretty bizarre. But the Russian Ministry of Defense reported the alleged downing of 4 ATACMS missiles. They claimed that, quote, another missile during the repulsion deviated from the flight path, exploding over the beach in the city of Sevastopol. Meanwhile, a video of the alleged deflection of a missile in Sevastopol is being circulated online. Local authorities reported 3 dead and almost 100 injured. In times of war, it's impossible to verify some of the information disseminated by the aggressor. Please treat it with caution. What you've then had is... there are lots of videos coming out of people at the beach panicking and explosions around that sound like cluster munitions, and we have people like Aidan here, who's a pro-Russian, talking about how this is all the Americans' fault for providing these ATACMS. Here's the Daily Telegraph. Screaming sunbathers run for cover as Ukrainian ATACMS explodes over Crimean beach. Again, I'd be warned. The Telegraph reporting... it seems that's what's happened. There are some different theories going around. I would always put an asterisk with these. If I was doing the headlines there, I'd be alleged and whatnot. But hey-ho. So the ATACMS are supposedly targeting. So this is Sevastopol. There's, I think, your beach, and there's Belbek Air Base. And you can see the beach is very close to the airbase. Already confirmed the ATACMS were targeting an airfield barely 2 to 3 kilometers away. The air defense had to try to intercept above the beach. Unlucky, maybe don't vacation right next to a military airfield in a war zone. And that's kind of the point for me. There is another theory here that using a Tor M2 air defense system to intercept a ballistic missile is stupid and pointless. In turn, if the rocket fails to cope with the task, its self-destruction system is triggered. It's possible that the missile, which failed to intercept the airborne object, self-destructed right above the heads of the vacationers on Uchkoevka. So that could have been what happened. But either way, you've got people, and there's another video here. Oh no, it's that same one. Russians are unhappy that the Russian authorities and Ministry of Defense did not use air alert sirens to warn civilians of danger. So first of all, the air raid sirens did not go off. So that's a bit of a concern if you're Russian living in an area that is routinely attacked. Crimea is a holiday destination, but it's being absolutely hammered and has been for months now. Why are Russians going on holiday? That's like me in World War One going, do you know where I'm going to go on holiday today? Do you know what I really love? I love the fields, the fields of Somme. Should we go to the Somme? Yeah, let's go to the Somme. That's a lovely place this time of year, isn't it? Setting up in no man's land with my picnic table. Oh, what should we have today? Mines on toast. Just honestly insane. Why Russians are consistently still going to Crimea, and they have done the last few years in the middle of a war when increasingly Crimea is being targeted. Just insane. Russians are placing military equipment next to civilian objects and irresponsibly encouraging Russian tourism to the annexed Crimea, says the Ukrainian Review. I don't know that their place. I think Belbek Air Base is just near to the beach, and that's that. I would not advise going on holiday near Sevastopol. Just honestly. Anyway, the Russians at the moment are blaming the Americans, saying it's the Americans' fault that people trying to sunbathe have been injured and killed. On June the 22nd, Ukraine used HIMARS for the first time in an attack in Russia's Kursk region, targeting the villages of Myrny and Dolgia Budi, according to Russian channel Astra. Both projectiles are reportedly intercepted, but shrapnel would have partially destroyed the FSB border department building in Sudzha, injuring one employee and damaging 2 cars. So we've shot down 2 HIMARS rockets, but the shrapnel from them hit an FSB building. Or maybe the missile hit the FSB building. It's the building intercepted the missile. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they did intercept it, and the shrapnel luckily did fall on an FSB building. It seems rather suspect to me. But anyway, point here is that ATACMS are being used up into Kursk region. So you've got Belgorod above Kharkiv, and you've got Kursk above Sumy region, which is just to the left, just to the west of Kharkiv and Belgorod. And so they have been given permission to use these into Sumy now, and that appears to be what is indeed happening. Damn, this was out of place. So this should have been after the Sevastopol beach piece. So here, Claire Feller saying, hello morons and pro-Russian freaks, okay, who are whining about Ukraine attacking Sevastopol today. I'd like to introduce you to Article 58 of Additional Protocol 1 to the Geneva Conventions. This is because so many pro-Russians have been shouting about this, and it doesn't help when, as mentioned, you've got Daily Telegraph saying what they're saying. Anyway, Ukraine attacked a legitimate military target in Sevastopol, most likely Belbek airfield. The Russian occupiers claim to have shot down the missiles, and they claim that debris has fallen on Sevastopol's Uchkivivka beach, killing civilians. The beach is close to Belbek airfield. If there's a beach close to a military airfield, which is a frequent and valid military target, it is incumbent upon the occupiers to close the nearby beach to avoid civilian casualties and the danger of military operations. The only party to blame for these casualties is Russia. Of course, the best solution would be for all Russians to leave Crimea immediately. Crimea is Ukraine. And I love, again, this source not capitalizing Russia as well. It seems to be a cool little thing. So there's Article 58. The parties to the conflict shall, to the maximum extent feasible, without prejudice to Article 49 of the Fourth Convention, endeavour to remove the civilian population, individual civilians and civilian objects under their control from the vicinity of military objectives, avoiding military objectives within or near densely populated areas, and take the other necessary precautions to protect the civilian population, individual civilians and civilian objects under their control against the dangers resulting from military operations. So air raid sirens, at the very least, is part of that, Part C of Article 58. But then not allowing people to holiday on a beach right next to a military airbase that has been struck many, many times before. Yeah, absolutely ridiculous. Right, Engels Air Base, which is one up in Saratov, so if you continue northeast from Kharkiv, couple of 100 kilometers, or I don't know, I forget how far Saratov is away. This is interesting because these satellite images show that they are routinely rotating their planes, and it's eminently sensible. At the Engels airfield, Russian Tu-95 MS change place every 5 hours because they're afraid of drone attacks, according to tracking there. So interesting. Right, then other bits and pieces. So I reported this yesterday. It was Kryvyi Rih, where a coke production plant went up in smoke, quite literally. Kryvyi Rih engulfed in acrid black smoke after metallurgical plant accident, reportedly due to a power outage. Because of power outages that are very regular, but also, far-reaching, certain facilities are really struggling because they need consistent power the whole time. And so unfortunately, that has resulted in this plant in Kryvyi Rih having some major issues. This comes as Ukraine's energy sector grapples with 70% loss of generation capacity from Russian missile strikes, causing daily blackouts. We have in the Azov Battalion Chief of Staff, Bogdan Krotovich, has lodged an official complaint against a Ukrainian general who has, quote, killed more Ukrainian soldiers than any Russian general. He also claims 99% of the military hate him. We have a real diatribe, you can read it there, against I think an unnamed Ukrainian general. Now, this is not crazily unusual. I'm not explaining this away, but I was thinking about this earlier. Like, imagine in World War One, if you've got generals that are sending people off to their deaths in wave after wave after wave, and of course, what can people do? Well, sit and write a poem. Nowadays, we can get on social media and vent our spleen, with consummate ease. And so any annoyance on both sides is going to be publicly displayed. And here's an example. I'm not saying that there isn't an issue with this particular general. He's obviously made decisions that have caused Ukrainians to die. That is not unusual in a war, especially one that's been going for 2.5 years. But it is interesting to note that 50 years ago, 100 years ago, you never would have heard about this. And I was not saying it's either good or better or worse. It's probably better that we do hear about this, so remedial action can take place, and so on and so forth. But they're very disaffected. Azov Chief of Staff here. You can go and read that. I'll put that up again. You can pause the video and read that at your leisure. Chris Owicki here says injured Russian soldiers report that they are being sent straight back to fighting in Ukraine without any medical treatment or admission to hospitals. Their superiors are unsympathetic. F you and your effing splinters. Don't effing pee me off. I'll effing kill you, is a quote from one. Astra reports on the experience of soldiers from several regiments based in the Nizhny Novgorod region. According to Alexander, a Storm V member who is receiving treatment for shrapnel wounds and blast injuries, commanders have issued an order banning sick leave. Quote, on Friday, a guy from the company was discharged. I told him go to the unit and find out. He arrived and he was sent to Luhansk region to go to the ribbon, the front line. He's not combat ready. Everyone's ears are torn. There is shrapnel in their arms and legs. No one gets anything treated. People with fractures went back to Ukraine. Elite order dated 7th of June 2024 shows instructions on how the special contingent Storm V are to be treated. Quote, you are to prohibit the sending of personnel from the special contingent to points of permanent deployment, hospitals, with the exception of the frontline zone, as well as on sick leave. According to Alexander, although the order only names a special contingent, now every ordinary contract soldiers are in this pile. They even send you with plastered limbs. They say you will undergo rehabilitation in the Luhansk People's Republic. What kind of rehabilitation can there be if there are constant missile arrivals there? Astra also published an audio recording provided by Alexander of a conversation between wounded men and a Stashina, equivalent to a sergeant major, representing the military command. The discussion highlights the tensions between the men and their commanders. The men complain, quote, that they say we are nobody and there is no way to call us, one man complains. I received a head wound. I have about 13 fragments in my head and body in my hands. Here I am forbidden to go to the hospital. I am forbidden to go to the clinic. I need treatment because I'm covered in fragments. Conversation doesn't go well. In the end, the Stashina accuses the man of alcoholism and declares, shut the F up, F you and your effing splinters. Don't effing pee me off or I'll effing kill you. And that's that. Okay, anecdotal words, a bit more than anecdotal. There, you've got some evidence to suggest that that is an order that's come down from on high there. So this seems to be fairly systematic. And then we have null reports here saying a Russian mill blogger, Igor Guzenko, who's the 13th, is someone that we've used an awful lot in the past, released footage from the basement in the so-called DPR showing Russian soldiers with amputated limbs being held in poor conditions. According to Guzenko, these soldiers are wounded and untreated military personnel who are no longer needed and are hidden away. They are allegedly kept in a pigsty cage and made into cripple regiments due to shortage of personnel. Absolutely outrageous. Just incredible. So anyway, that's caught on camera, and yeah, make of this what you will, but I think this is more evidence that things are desperate for the Russians. In 2023, the SBU successfully conducted the world's first remote mining operation using naval drones, hitting 4 Russian ships. Sea Baby naval drones laid out 15 underwater mines, each weighing 180 kilograms, near Crimea, targeting enemy warships. Ukraine plans to create detachments of up to 20 unmanned drones and with distinct functions, collectively replicating the capabilities of a full-fledged warship. Wow. Okay, 2 things here. One, well, we'll take the second one first. So they are planning on getting together 20 of these drones that each have different roles, that together that fleet of 20 unmanned drones has the same functional ability of a warship. I think how much cheaper that is, and think how many people don't die that if these get sunk, right? That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible. And it's all about, when you're problem solving, you start with, what's the function, or what's the problem here? What do we need to achieve? Here it's like, well, we don't have a navy. Okay, so if I was problem solving the Ukrainian navy, I was like, we don't have a navy. We can't get big ships through the Bosphorus Strait, so we can't get a ship from elsewhere, train people up on it, bring it in there, and it'll get sunk anyway. So what is it that a warship does? Give me a list of the 10 things a warship does that we need to do. What are those functions? Okay, blah, 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 blah. Right. How can we achieve those functions in ways that don't involve warships? So can we use missiles? Can we use drones? Can we use, torpedo, and you'll go to the drawing board and develop these solutions to the problem of not having a navy. And here you go. You've got 20 drones that functionally work like a warship. And the other thing is that they are some of them are dropping these mines, hitting 4 Russian ships, it says here. Now, I saw an analysis yesterday. I can't find it, but I saw an analysis on Twitter yesterday from someone who has been analysing satellite imagery of Sevastopol and Novorossiysk, and says we're missing a bunch of ships here. Like, I'm missing 2 Rapucha class landing ships or whatever, and 2 of these, or I forget what it was. I should try and find it, because I just dismissed it and go, oh yeah. But I'm thinking they might have laid some mines and sunk these ships, and it wouldn't have been caught on like a drone camera. It wouldn't be caught on anything. You might have had Russian ships sink, and no one knows about it really, apart from the Russians themselves. And if there are a number of missing Russian warships from satellite imagery analysis, and then we're hearing from the SBU that 4 Russian warships have been hit from, I presume, from remote mining here, then that tallies. That adds up. Interestingly, SBU modified Sea Baby drones, they were equipped with 180 kilogram sea plastic mines, and these are difficult to detect, according to the Wall Street Journal. They've already blown up at least 4 Russian ships. There you go. So all those ships that we thought had been destroyed actively by drones, well, actually, possibly we can add 4 more ships to that. Even more incredible. Wow. And that's the sort of thing that should be headline news. Like how successful the Ukrainians have been in certain contexts. Anyway, that's enough for me. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share. Take care. Speak soon. Toodle pips.